This is not Bowser. This is not a normal mushroom. These guys were never supposed to be in a Mario game, and this guy has 2 normal-sized feet, but is wearing 1 giant shoe that is bigger than his whole body. And somehow, this is all completely normal in the world of Mario. For a short, mustachioed Italian plumber, Mario games sure can do a lot without anyone batting an eye. In the most recent run of 3D Mario games, he's been a cat, a bee, a dinosaur, a statue, even a Japanese raccoon dog? Whatever that is. And the thing is, all of it works. 3D Mario has always been Nintendo's sandbox for big, unexpected ideas that somehow manage to click the moment you play them. But stack those games next to 2D Mario, and for a long time it felt like a different series entirely. From New Super Mario Bros. In 2006 until Super Mario Bros. Wonder in 2023, 2D Mario often played it safe. The same power-ups, the same villains, the same levels shuffled around. That's how it got this reputation of being the same game over and over. But that's not always how it was. That's not how it was supposed to be. With the 40th anniversary of the original Super Mario Bros. Coming up, I want to revisit the 4 NES Mario titles, because these weren't just the start of the series. They were bold, inventive, and sometimes downright bizarre. And in ways you might not expect, they have more in common with Super Mario Odyssey and Super Mario Bros. Wonder than with the point A to point B 2D Marios that we all got used to. These games didn't just launch Mario. They are the DNA for everything you like about Mario to this day, because the NES Mario games are way weirder than you remember. Where else could we start except Super Mario Bros. In 1985? This game launched the Super Mario series, launched the NES, gave us so much of the music we associate with Mario today, was the first game to have tight controls while running and jumping, helped revive the dead video game industry, and yet, I still think this game is slept on today because it's old and because it feels like they've remade it 1,000 times. Super Mario Bros. Has been talked about ad nauseum and is easily one of the most important video games of all time. But because it is well known by so many people, and because it's so simple in concept, I'm of the belief that this game's finer details aren't quite as appreciated as they should be. The instant you turn this game on, you are faced with a last-second addition that wouldn't exist if the playtesters were just a bit better. This iconic Goomba was originally a Koopa Troopa until late in development. They didn't have a lot of memory left, so they needed an easier enemy who could function with one single sprite. Flip this one image back and forth as he charges at Mario, and voila! One of the most unforgettable Mario enemies is born as a last-second change. World 1-1 acts as one of the best tutorials in video games, as Mario starts off with this Goomba running at him like a madman, trying to... what do Goombas even do to Mario? Well, regardless, you of course need to avoid the Goombas and Koopas while jumping around pipes and blocks to reach the flagpole at the end of the course. Since this is the first level in the series, the list of things it introduced is insanely long, but there's one part of World 1-1 with importance that can't be overstated: the power-ups. Power-ups already existed in much simpler fashion, even for Mario, but the idea of a permanent power-up, especially the Fire Flower, a permanent projectile add-on, was unprecedented for the time. There are tons of reasons why Super Mario Bros. Was a successful game, but the way Nintendo handled power-ups has a legitimate argument to be at the top of that list. The Fire Flower literally changes the entire way you play the game, one way or another. You either run full speed ahead, blasting everything in your path, or you now move along methodically, destroying things to make sure the path ahead is always safe, in order to preserve your Fire Flower. And truly, if you decide to be careful with your Fire Flowers, it is not at all a stretch to say that you can beat all 32 levels with relative ease, even if you've never played this game before. Along your way to rescuing Princess Peach from World 8-4, a redhead in-game who was just called Princess Toadstool in the West at the time, you first make your way through 7 castles with a Bowser fight at the end of each. Either chop down the bridge with this conveniently placed axe, or shoot Bowser with enough fireballs to defeat him and beat the level that way. But if you look carefully after beating Bowser with fire, you'll see that these first 7 Bowser fights are actually imposters, regular enemies disguised as the Koopa King and taking on the full brunt of his power. Longtime vets of this game probably take this for granted, but this is really such a novel idea for the time. It makes the game feel way better than thinking you've kicked Bowser's butt 7 times in a row before rescuing Peach.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
Fake Bowsers are far from the only quirk in this game. Many of the familiar faces of the Mushroom Kingdom have some weird names to them. Let's start with the little mushroom guys themselves, the Toads. Or, as they're called in this game, mushroom retainers? If you look at the description of them, it appears to imply that they are just called mushrooms as a species, and that these 7 are retainer mushrooms who work for the princess. Old video game manuals are so weird, bro. You might know these little squids as bloopers, but here, they're not bloopers, they're bloopers. Goombas are specifically called little Goombas, and apparently, their mushroom shape isn't an accident, because they are mushrooms, like Toad, who betrayed the Mushroom Kingdom. So next time you see a Toad interact with a Goomba, just know, you might as well be seeing the Mario version of Obi-Wan Kenobi interacting with Darth Vader. A lot of descriptions really lean into the fact that Koopas are based off turtles, though they're of course not called turtles. That said, you know these things? Bullet bills? Perhaps the least turtle-like thing that you'll see in the overworld levels? Tell me why the cannons that shoot bullet bills were originally called turtle cannons, of all things. You know, the more I dig into it, what the heck was even going on to write this game back in 1985? The more you look into it, the more unexpected twists it throws at you. Between the fake enemies, the familiar characters under names we never call them, and the complete rewrites of what a platforming game or a power-up could look like, Super Mario Bros. On the NES immediately set a precedent that told the players pretty much anything goes. And we didn't have to wait long to see Nintendo fully embrace that, because the sequel to Super Mario Bros., the game we know as The Lost Levels, doesn't pull any punches at all. Bring on the original Super Mario Bros. 2, the game that was too hard for Americans to beat. In a similar vein to how the impact of Super Mario Bros. Has been beaten to death by YouTubers over many years, that one line about Super Mario Bros. 2, or some variation of it, has done the same thing to this game. You know what? Why don't I get ahead of myself for the next segment too? Did you know the Super Mario Bros. 2 was a reskin of a Japanese-only game called Yume Kojo Doki Doki Panic because the actual Mario 2 was considered too hard? There we go, there's the full story. I first played this game back in 2019 when it got added to Nintendo Switch Online and became familiar enough with it to the point that, before I started filming for this video, I often underplayed its difficulty due to brute forcing my way through this game a few different times. To put this game's difficulty into perspective, when you game over in Super Mario Bros. 1, you're normally knocked all the way back to the start of the game. In the Lost Levels, you only go back to the beginning of the world you're in. In spite of that, and without using any warps of course, it is still probably 10 times easier to beat the original Super Mario Bros. And it's a hard game on its own by today's standards. I know it's this game's signature feature, but beating the Lost Levels again for this video felt like doing this on loop for hours. To get back to the theme of the video, you may be thinking, but Shapirian, isn't the whole point of this to explain how the NES Mario games were creative in ways that we can still see in Mario games to this day? Well, yes, and I will do my best to explain how this applies to the Lost Levels in a way that doesn't sound hypocritical. I don't think in general Super Mario Bros. 2, The Lost Levels, is super creative, given that it is just essentially a reskin of Mario 1 with difficulty ramped up to 10. However, there is still something valuable in asking if you can take something people really enjoyed and add a very real challenge to it. While Lost Levels is not my favorite example of this, I think the DNA of the Lost Levels can be found in Star Road from Super Mario World, the Perfect Run in Super Mario Galaxy 2, and the Final Test in Super Mario Bros. Wonder, all 3 of which are my favorite and most memorable parts of those games respectively. In fact, pretty much every single Mario game made today has some version of going from Super Mario Bros. 1 to 2, taking the base game and just making it a lot harder. And I imagine Nintendo learned from the mistake of making the latter its own separate game, leading to the structure that we see now. That said, if you want to look at other aspects of the Lost Levels that have stuck around, the infamous poison mushroom that everyone rags on isn't even all that rare these days, and it's made a handful of appearances in other mainline and spin-off Mario games alike. The wind physics in this game are so jank, but are one of the earliest games to have a weather-themed hazard, something that's very standard today. This one's a bit weird, but is another great example of Nintendo saying, hey, whatever, anything goes. But there's a character who shows up just one time, right before you fight the real Bowser, called Bowser's brother. He's never been seen since. He's never been given any other official name. He's basically written out of the All-Stars remake, and he definitely could have just been a fake Bowser. The Lost Levels was the Mario game that gave us the 1-up when grabbing the flagpole, albeit for much different reasons than just touching the top. But that's at least something that this game has left behind. Super Mario Bros. 2 The Lost Levels is far more similar to a train wreck than it is a masterpiece. I think it's still my least favorite mainline Mario I've ever played, and its place in Mario history is far from black and white due to being a Japan exclusive when it was released. But there's no denying it still has a role in the Mario formula we know and love today. While Super Mario Bros. 1 and 2 have some lore and concepts that feel like the result of a fever dream though, well, sometimes it turns out a game is indeed just a fever dream. Enter Super Mario Bros. 2. After 2 games where you can basically just get away with holding right and pressing A at the right time, Nintendo said, hey, what if we literally threw all of that in the garbage? Flagpoles? Nope. Weird glowing eggs most of the time. Stomping on enemies? Could not be less effective. Don't let the enemies touch you? Sorta true, but really the opposite. You can pick them up and throw them. Goombas are gone. Koopas are mostly gone. Only some underground shells of theirs remain. Bowser? Who's that? In their places are Shy Guys, Sniffits, Bob-ombs, and Birdo, plus a few other weirdos who haven't been around since this game. Right away, it's clear that we're getting something different here, even if the reasoning for it is obvious in retrospect. Think back to this game's release though. Very few people had the context of this being a reskin, and yet, with this being the sequel to maybe the most important game ever at that time, it was received really well. Even today, with almost 40 years having passed, some sequels that changed the model and were received well at the time, looking at you, Zelda 2, are now looked back at rather negatively by most people. But Mario 2 is remembered very positively, despite also having a good amount of flaws. While I don't love that this game was just a dream from Mario, I'm glad that we can say that this game undoubtedly left a major impact on the Mario series, and introduced so many staples that we know and love today. Besides the enemies we've already mentioned, you can't talk about SMB2 without talking about how Luigi jumps super high, a first for the players in the West, and about how Peach floats, one of her most important traits to this day. Oh, and Toad is faster. I don't think anyone really cares about that one for SMB2, but hey, all of these abilities of course stuck with these characters when they were the 4 base characters in Super Mario 3D World, and they're generally considered canon for them, whatever canon even looks like in the Mario universe. Outside of literal traits and characters that are still used today though, SMB2 may be the best example of what I mean when I look at most of the new Soup series and say, this isn't how it's supposed to be. This is the first Mario game where the mold was broken, a trend that defines most Mario entries since. The tone of this game is immaculate from the jump. The music is some of the catchiest in Mario history. You have this interesting Middle Eastern influenced aesthetic of deserts, waterfalls, pyramids and the sort. Some levels have these creepy phantom masks that follow you whenever you grab their keys. You also have a handful of unique bosses outside of the Birdo fights, another first for the series, and it all ends with the fight against Wart, the big fat frog who you beat by force feeding him vegetables. I love the Wart fight and so badly wish he'd make a comeback somehow. He does make an appearance in Link's Awakening, another famous Dream game, alongside some other Mario characters. But that's it for my guy. For some reason, I really held out hope that we would see him in Wonder. It just felt like the perfect time to bring him back. But since that game came and went, I think it's a safe bet to say we'll probably never see Wart featured prominently again. SMB2 perfectly encapsulates what I mean when I say that the NES Mario games were creative and downright bizarre at times. It may have just been a dream for Mario, but I'm glad that it wasn't for us, because the positive effects of this game that should have never happened are still being felt in the franchise to this day. But if we're talking about why the NES Mario games stick out in a crowd, we can't overlook the game that felt impossible for the console it was made for. The game that pushed the hardware to its limits. The game that, in my opinion, is still the crown jewel of Mario side-scrollers. Super Mario Bros. 3. SMB2 is great, but Mario 3 was a massive return to form that feels closer to what we expect from a modern Mario game. I wasn't around in 1988, but the cultural hype surrounding this game seems like it was insane. Magazine covers, commercials, even an entire movie based around the game that debuted before the game was out in the West. This game's release was an important moment in gaming history. And it's no mystery why. This game in many ways was the real sequel fans had been waiting for years. In Japan, they hadn't yet received our version of Super Mario Bros. 2, so the only two Mario games they knew were incredibly similar, and ultimately nothing like Mario 3. To go from the first Mario game and lost levels to a game with an overworld map, branching paths, an item inventory, so much variety and power-ups, including my favorite Mario power-up, the Tanuki suit. SMB3 brought forth so many changes to the series and did so with great success. You might hear me throw around the term greatest, crown jewel, or masterpiece a lot on this channel, even for some games that aren't commonly thought of to be such. But it's not an overstatement to say that this game deserves every bit of those titles and then some. This game's ability to make each world feel different was just not that common at the time, certainly not in any of Nintendo's important IPs on the NES. It may show its age when you hold it up against Super Mario World or your pick of the lot of the many Mario games that have followed, but I really struggle to sit and point out anything that this game did wrong. The music? Perfect. Airships as the boss levels in each world are so smooth and fun while being challenging. And come on, the Koopalings are such fun bosses, even if they are a little repetitive in nature. The theming of SMB3 is that it's a play, which is honestly a bit of a blink and you'll miss it moment on the title screen, unless you notice that the end of most levels is you exiting stage left. This is such a novel concept for a game in its era, and could not do a better job of displaying how Nintendo views their characters. In a world where there's so much talk about timelines and lore and canon, especially recently, because someone has recently brought these discussions back into the spotlight, and I promise we will get to that in another video. What a great way to highlight how these characters can be at each other's throats in one moment, just to end up hanging out together in the next. They're just being used as characters to make whatever fun game they want to make at that time. I don't literally think it's meant to be interpreted as a play, where Mario and Bowser are reenacting a script, but it's such a good nod to how Mario can show up anywhere and do just about anything without looking too out of place or breaking your immersion. There's still so much to say about SMB3, and I have no doubt this won't be the last time I bring it up on this channel. But you really don't need to say much to see why many consider it to be the best game for Nintendo's original home console. That said, let's not forget why we're here, because this game has plenty of eyebrow raisers. We can't forget about things like the Kuribo shoe, a Goomba wearing a gigantic shoe for absolutely no reason. If you attack it from the bottom, Mario can hop in the shoe himself and walk across pretty much anything. But they did put this whole thing in the game just to use it in one level. That's right, the Goomba shoe, how do they not call it the Shoomba by the way, gets the same treatment as Bowser and the Koopalings. We of course can't forget about the elusive hammer suit as well. That power-up that we all remember fondly really isn't all that strong when you're using it. Who else was letting you gain the powers of the bad guys at that time? And to this day, this has to be one of the coolest Mario transformations. And what made them want to stick the angry sun in the game? Listen, it's a great and fun inclusion, but this jerk absolutely tortured me as a kid because I was just terrible at video games. Did they ever clarify, by the way, if this is the sun? And why is he so angry? What did Mario do to it? Or how did Bowser recruit the actual sun to be on his side? SMB3 is perhaps the most polished game on the console, but don't you ever forget that this game is plenty weird. If Super Mario Bros. Invented the formula, well then Lost Levels stress tested it, Super Mario Bros. 2 pushed the formula aside for a moment in time, and then Super Mario Bros. 3 absolutely perfected it. It was the perfect send-off for the NES, and is widely considered to be a love letter to the console that redefined gaming. I love the current state of the Mario franchise. Ever since Odyssey launched for the Switch, it has felt like Nintendo was back. But 3D Mario never really left or had a slip-up. It certainly never went through the period of purgatory that 2D Mario did for side-scrolling fans like myself. I'm really glad we got Super Mario Bros. Wonder. It's a great game, and we at least know Nintendo is aware they can still make different 2D Marios. That said, it's hard for me to imagine a world where once again 2D Mario is looked at in the same light that the big time box office 3D Mario games are. But the next time you capture a crazy looking creature in Odyssey, or you're trying to complete the perfect run in Galaxy 2, or you're just desperately trying not to crush a watermelon in Sunshine, just remember, you can thank 2D Mario for the greatness that we see in 3D Mario. These games were wild, they're a little bit crazy, and they're still unique to this day. And let's be honest, they are the reason that we can see Mario do just about anything.